Procrastination is the bad habit of putting off into the day after tomorrow what should have been done the day before yesterday. Most people never fail because they tried and fell short. They fail long before effort is required. They fail quietly, internally, invisibly, inside their own minds. Failure, for the majority, is not an event. It is a decision made subconsciously, disguised as caution, comfort, or being realistic. And by the time life reflects that decision back to them, they call it bad luck. Before a single action is taken, most people have already rehearsed defeat. They imagine rejection before opportunity, loss before gain, embarrassment before growth. Their minds run simulations of failure so vivid that action feels dangerous, irresponsible, even foolish. And so they hesitate. They delay. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect version of themselves. That moment never comes. And what they call patience is often just fear with better manners. The first truth no one wants to accept is this: most people fail before they even start because they're emotionally attached to certainty. They want guarantees in a world that rewards courage. They want assurance before commitment. They want proof before belief. But history has never worked that way. Every meaningful achievement was born in uncertainty, carried forward by faith, and justified only after persistence produced results. The human mind is designed to protect, not to expand. Left unchecked, it prioritizes safety over growth, familiarity over progress. It scans for risk, magnifies threat, and whispers reasons to stay where you are. This is not weakness. It is biology, but success requires that you override this default setting. And most people never learn how. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek approval, avoid mistakes, and measure ourselves against external standards. We are rewarded for compliance, not for courage. Over time, this conditioning creates an internal governor, a psychological limit on what we believe is possible for us, not for others, for us. And once that limit is accepted, ambition quietly shrinks to fit inside it. This is why people admire success but rarely pursue it. They applaud bravery in others while choosing safety for themselves. They study the lives of achievers like Edison, Ford, Carnegie, or Lincoln, and treat their stories as exceptions rather than evidence. They forget that these individuals were once unproven, uncertain, and often ridiculed. What separated them was not clarity. It was conviction. Clarity is overrated at the beginning. Conviction is what matters. Most people wait to feel ready. But readiness is a myth. Confidence does not precede action. It follows it. Belief does not appear before movement. It is built through movement. The mind gains certainty by doing, not by thinking. And this is the great paradox. The very action you are afraid to take is the action that would dissolve your fear. Instead of acting, people overthink. They analyze. They research. They plan endlessly. They confuse preparation with progress. But thinking without action only strengthens doubt. The more you think without moving, the more reasons your mind generates to stay still. Over time, inaction becomes an identity. And once that happens, starting feels impossible. Not because it is hard, but because it threatens who you believe yourself to be. Another reason people fail before they start is because they secretly fear responsibility. Success demands ownership. It removes excuses. It eliminates the comfort of blame. When you commit fully, you can no longer say, "I never tried." You can no longer hide behind potential. You must confront results. And for many, the fear of owning failure is greater than the pain of never trying. This is why people stay in situations they dislike, jobs that drain them, lives that feel small, dreams that remain theoretical. Because as long as a dream is untouched, it cannot be disproven. As long as they never begin, they can still believe they could have. Potential becomes a shield against accountability, but potential and used turns into regret. The philosophy Napoleon Hill uncovered was brutally simple. Success begins with a definite decision, not a wish, not a preference. A decision so clear that the mind organizes itself around it. When a decision is made at that level, excuses lose power, distractions weaken, energy aligns. But without decision, effort scatters, motivation fluctuates, and nothing compounds. Most people think they lack discipline. In truth, they lack a definite purpose. discipline is not forced. It emerges naturally when the why is strong enough. You do not need discipline to do what matters deeply to you. You need clarity. And clarity only comes when you are honest about what you want and what you are willing to give up to get it. This is where many retreat, because wanting something deeply means risking disappointment. It means caring enough to be hurt. An emotional risk feels unsafe to a mind trained to avoid pain. So people lower their desires. They say they are content. They say they are grateful. But often, this is resignation disguised as maturity. True gratitude does not cancel ambition. It grounds it. Another hidden reason people fail before starting is identity conflict. To begin something meaningful, you must accept that the current version of you is incomplete, that there's a gap between who you are and who you must become. And the ego resists that admission. It prefers consistency over growth. It would rather protect a familiar self-image than evolve into a stronger one. Starting requires humility. It requires being bad at something, being seen learning, being misunderstood, and in a culture obsessed with appearances, this feels unbearable. So people postpone beginnings until they can start perfectly, which is another way of saying they never start at all. The brutal truth is this: beginnings are messy by design. The early stages are supposed to feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is not a sign of incompetence. It is a signal of expansion. Every skill you admire was once awkward. Every master was once a beginner. But the beginner who keeps going becomes dangerous. And the world quietly respects those who persist. Most people also fail early because they underestimate the power of environment. They surround themselves with voices that normalize mediocrity, that question ambition, that mock discipline. Not because those voices are malicious, but because they are fearful. And fear spreads faster than courage. If you are not intentional about what you consume and who you listen to, your resolve will erode before it ever solidifies. Starting requires insulation, protection of thought, control of input. You cannot plant a fragile idea in hostile soil and expect it to grow. This is why solitude often precedes success. Not loneliness, but distance from noise, space to think clearly, to commit privately before announcing publicly. And this leads to another uncomfortable reality. Most people talk too much and act too little. They announce intentions before building foundations. They seek validation before creating results. When praise fades or criticism appears, motivation collapses. The successful move in silence until action gives them confidence that applause never could. The mind respects evidence, and action creates evidence. Failing before starting is rarely dramatic. It looks like procrastination, like distraction, like being busy, like waiting. And because it looks harmless, it goes unchallenged. But years pass quickly, and one day, waiting turns into a habit, and the habit turns into a life. The question is not whether you are capable of starting. The question is what belief is currently stopping you. And that belief can be rewritten, but only if you are willing to confront it. That belief can be rewritten, but only if you are willing to confront it honestly, without excuses and without self-deception. Because the beliefs that stop you from starting are rarely loud. They do not announce themselves as fear. They disguise themselves as logic, as timing, as responsibility, as patience. And unless you learn to expose them, they will quietly govern your life. Most limiting beliefs were never consciously chosen. They were absorbed, inherited from parents who meant well but played small, from teachers who rewarded obedience over originality, from peers who mocked ambition to protect their own comfort. Over time, these influences fuse into an internal voice that sounds like your own, and that voice becomes the gatekeeper of action. This is why so many people say, "I'm just not that type of person," as if identity were fixed, as if character were permanent, as if growth were a betrayal of who they've always been. But identity is not a prison. It is a construction, and what has been constructed can be reconstructed. Starting requires a temporary suspension of self-definition. You must be willing to act before you feel like the kind of person who does this, because no one starts as the person they become. They become that person by starting. This reversal of logic is where most people get stuck. They wait to feel worthy before acting, instead of acting until worthiness is built. Another reason people fail before they begin is the illusion of infinite time. They believe there will always be another chance, another year, another season to start fresh. But time is not generous. It is precise. It gives each person the same daily allocation and never offers refunds. The longer you delay, the more expensive starting becomes, not because opportunity disappears, but because energy erodes. Momentum favors the young in spirit, not in age. Those who act early gain confidence early. Those who delay must overcome not only fear, but regret, and regret is heavier than fear. Fear is imagined, regret is remembered. Starting early is not about being perfect. It is about reducing friction. Every year you wait, habits harden, comfort deepens, risk tolerance shrinks. What once felt exciting begins to feel threatening. And then one day, the idea of starting feels so foreign that staying stuck seems safer, even if it hurts. This is the silent cost of delay. Napoleon Hill spoke often about definiteness of purpose because he understood this principle deeply. A mind without direction becomes a playground for doubt. When you do not decide what you want, the world decides for you. Circumstances take control. Other people's priorities fill your schedule. And slowly, your life becomes reactive instead of intentional. People say they are overwhelmed, but overwhelm is often the result of indecision. When nothing is prioritized, everything feels heavy. When no direction is chosen, every option creates anxiety. Starting simplifies. Decision clarifies. Action organizes chaos. There's also a misunderstanding about failure that stops many before they begin. They believe failure is something to be avoided at all costs. But failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of its construction. Every attempt teaches the mind what works, what doesn't, and what to adjust. Those who never start never receive feedback. And without feedback, growth is impossible. The successful do not fear failure. They fear stagnation. They fear wasting potential. They fear living below their standards. Failure, to them, is data, it is information, it is temporary. But not starting feels permanent. Another brutal truth is that starting often disrupts relationships. When you change direction, others notice. When you raise your standards, others feel exposed. When you commit seriously, casual connections weaken. This social friction is one of the strongest forces keeping people stuck. Humans are wired for belonging, and starting something new often means standing apart. But belonging that requires self-betrayal is not belonging, it is captivity. Those who begin despite this pressure understand something essential. You can love people without living at their level. You can respect others without adopting their limits. Growth does not require rejection of others, but it does require loyalty to yourself. The moment you start acting in alignment with a higher vision, internal conflict arises. The old self resists. Old habits demand comfort. Old narratives argue for safety. This internal resistance is not a sign of failure. It is proof that change has begun. The mistake most people make is interpreting resistance as danger rather than transformation. Every meaningful beginning feels unstable. That instability is temporary. What is permanent is the strength that develops when you move through it. There's also the matter of discipline. Many believe discipline is something you either have or don't have. This is false. Discipline is not a personality trait. It is a byproduct of commitment. When you truly decide, discipline follows. When you hesitate, discipline collapses. You cannot build discipline on uncertainty. This is why starting small matters. Not because small actions are powerful in themselves, but because they create self-trust. Each completed action sends a signal to the mind. I follow through. Over time, the signal compounds. Confidence is not built through affirmations. It is built through evidence. Most people wait for confidence to start. The successful start to build confidence. Another overlooked reason people fail early is distraction. The modern world is engineered to fragment attention. Notifications, entertainment, endless information, all designed to keep you consuming instead of creating. Starting requires focus, and focus requires boundaries. If you do not protect your attention, it will be rendered out to the highest bidder. You cannot begin something meaningful in a mind constantly pulled in 100 directions. Stillness is not laziness. It is preparation. Silence is not emptiness. It is clarity. Those who learn to sit with their thoughts without immediate stimulation develop an unfair advantage. They can hear themselves think. And thinking clearly is a foundation of all action. The act of starting is an act of self-respect. It says, my future is worth effort. It says, my vision deserves action. It says, I will no longer negotiate with fear. This declaration may not be spoken aloud, but the subconscious hears it. And when the subconscious believes you are serious, it begins to cooperate. Opportunities appear not because the world changed, but because your perception sharpened. You notice what you previously ignored. You recognize patterns. You connect dots. Action trains awareness. This is why people who start seem lucky. They are not luckier. They are moving, and movement creates collisions with opportunity. Most people fail before they start because they overestimate the pain of beginning and underestimate the pain of staying the same. But the pain of stagnation accumulates quietly. It shows up as restlessness, as dissatisfaction, as the nagging sense that something is being wasted. And that pain does not fade. It grows. Starting interrupts that trajectory. You do not need to know the entire path. You only need to know the next honest step. Progress reveals itself sequentially, not all at once. Those who demand full visibility before acting will remain frozen. Those who accept partial clarity gain momentum. And momentum is transformative. Once you begin, identity shifts. You are no longer someone who plans to. You are someone who does. That shift changes how you think, how you speak, how you choose. The world responds differently to people in motion. And more importantly, you respond differently to yourself. The greatest tragedy is not failure. It is never testing what you are capable of. And that tragedy begins the moment you decide not to start.